Iran's ports seized, oil stopped. This is no protest, it's collapse.
Protests in Iran have escalated into a full-blown civil war between the regime and the people on their 12th night. However, today's most striking and regime-ending events took place not in the capital, but in the port city of Bandar Abbas and the refinery city of Avaz, the heart of the country. With port and refinery workers joining the general strike and protests, evidence is pouring in that the people have begun to take control of these strategic cities. This is now a ticking time bomb for the Khamenei regime. If the regime's most sensitive economic artery is severed, Tehran's ability to withstand this popular revolution becomes mathematically impossible. With the smoke from the clashes in Tehran's streets still not cleared, the real strategic earthquake occurred in southern Iran, at the key point of the Persian Gulf. According to verified images flowing from social media and reliable OSINT sources on the ground, Iran's largest gateway to the world is now on the verge of completely slipping out of the regime's control. Anti-regime protesters have seized critical points, customs gates, and main arteries in Bandar Abbas, Iran's most strategic port city on the Persian Gulf. Security forces have reportedly been forced to retreat in the face of this massive and angry crowd, with some even abandoning their uniforms and fleeing by blending in with the civilian population. To understand the gravity of this incident, we must look beyond the concept of a street protest and take a technical look at what Bandar Abbas means for the Iranian regime. This is not a simple coastal city. It is a massive economic hub that single-handedly manages 85% of Iran's container traffic, 70% of its total foreign trade. Right now, this lung has stopped breathing. Videos from the port area show protesters climbing atop cranes and hoisting pre-1979 Lion and Sun flags. This action is not merely a change of fabric, but a visual declaration that sovereignty has changed hands, that the regime's rule has ended on Iranian soil. The participation of port workers in Bandar Abbas in the strike and the transfer of facilities to popular control is shattering not only the regime's foreign trade, but also the logistics chain it needs to survive. Ships are anchored in the open sea, unable to load or unload. The regime has lost its food imports, industrial raw materials, and most critically, the flow of technical equipment needed by its security forces. The participation of port workers in the strike, the stoppage of cranes, and the transfer of control of the facilities to popular committees are not only disrupting the regime's foreign trade, but also shattering the basic logistics chain it needs to survive. Imagine a country where the main gateway for food imports, medicine, and industrial spare parts is locked, and the key is in the hands of the masses seeking to overthrow that regime. If the regime loses Bandar Abbas, which current images suggest it is about to do, this is not just the loss of a city, but the end of Iran's presence in global waters. The fall of this city, home to the Iranian Navy's main base, will be the biggest nail in the mullah's coffin, and right now, the hammer is in the hands of the people. However, logistical suffocation is only the first layer of this disaster scenario. The second and much more deadly aspect of the crisis for the regime has erupted in the country's energy heartland, the province of Khuzestan. Images coming out of Avaz, Iran's energy capital, prove that the regime is losing its grip on the oil fields. Refinery workers in Khuzestan province, which holds 80% of Iran's oil reserves, have finally said enough to years of ethnic discrimination, economic pressure, and poor working conditions. The workers did not just go on strike, they physically halted production, and protesters are closing valves, declaring that they have liberated strategic facilities. The daily production capacity of 4 million barrels of oil is now under direct and physical threat. Losing control of the city of Avaz would dry up the regime's only hot cash source for funding the Revolutionary Guards, IRGC, besieged militias, and proxy forces across the border. When the money stops flowing, so does loyalty. Reports from the field indicate that the ethnic Arab population in the Khuzestan region has combined its pent-up anger over years of marginalization with this strategic sabotage. This uprising in Avaz has the potential to shake not only Iran, but also global markets. It could create a shockwave that increases global oil prices by 20 to 30%, triggering hyperinflation and a definitive economic collapse scenario for the regime. The issue is no longer reform or wage increases. It is the failure of the regime's vital organs, its heart and lungs. Now, let's pull the camera back a little from those chaotic streets and look at the massive strategic wreckage created by these tactical events. The regime's loss of control over the port city of Bandar Abbas and Avaz does not just mean the lights going out in Tehran, it means the shaking of global geopolitical balances. The Khamenei regime has been the keystone of the anti-Western bloc it has built with Russia and China for years. But tonight, that keystone has shifted, and the entire structure is collapsing with a crash. First, focus on the most critical line on the map, the North-South Transport Corridor, INSTC. Russia was vitally dependent on this route, which runs from the Caspian Sea to the Persian Gulf, Bandar Abbas, in order to circumvent the embargoes in the Ukraine war, trade with India, and maintain its military logistics. This route, which Putin called the Southern Gateway, is currently physically shut down by protesters' barricades. The moment control of the Bandar Abbas port leaves the regime, Russia's only secure elevator to warm seas is broken. This is not just a commercial loss for Moscow, but a military disaster, because it means the logistical artery feeding Russia's war machine is now severed. And the chain reaction extends to the east of Asia, all the way to Beijing. The most critical leg of China's Belt and Road Initiative in the Middle East has collapsed as of tonight. Let's take the camera away from the clashes in the streets of Tehran and focus on the global chessboard, the real geopolitical dimension of events, the bigger picture. Because what we are witnessing in the streets of Iran today is not just an explosion of anger linked to gasoline prices or exchange rates. This is the breaking of the weakest link in the global autocracy chain. In the Moscow-Beijing-Tehran axis, which has for years forced the world into a multipolar order, propping each other up to stay in power, the Iran pillar is collapsing. And this collapse contains one of the greatest ironies of modern history. The Islamic Revolution, which was the nightmare of the Western world in 1979, has now turned into a 2026 model nightmare, a counter-revolution for the Eastern Bloc and autocratic regimes. Khamenei is experiencing the most crowded, loudest, but most helpless loneliness in history. However, this time, there is a major absence on the stage. Russia and China, the big brothers who came to the rescue of the Iranian regime in every social event in the past, are silent this time. The support autocratic regimes give each other is actually based on a brotherhood of survival. They fear the domino effect with a deathly dread, knowing that when one falls, the other will be shaken. So why? Where are Khamenei's big brothers, Russia and China? The answer is simple, ruthless, and just as instructive: the orphanhood of autocrats. This alliance was not a union of values or a pledge of loyalty, but a pure partnership of fear and interest. And when the ship takes on water, the captains close the lifeboats before the rats. Russia is currently busy melting its own army in the Ukrainian quagmire and trying to keep its economy afloat under sanctions. Putin has neither a mercenary unit to send to Tehran, nor an air defense system, nor a single ruble to donate. Moscow's logistical and military capacity is so stretched that it can only helplessly watch the collapse of its strategic partner Iran from the Kremlin's windows. This passivity is not a choice for Russia, but a necessity. And this collapse means Russia will lose its largest logistical base in the Middle East, the security of the Caspian Sea, and the Southern Corridor. If Iran falls, Russia's southern flank will be completely defenseless, and its presence in Syria will be logistically cut off. For Russia, Iran's fall would mean the completion of its own encirclement. On the Chinese front, the situation is even more pragmatic, cold, and ruthless. Beijing, grappling with its own economic stagnation, real estate crisis, and internal debt problems, refuses to make political or military investments in a sinking ship. For China, Iran was a source of cheap oil and a stop on the Belt and Road project. In other words, an asset. However, an Iran that is becoming unstable, being dragged into civil war, and rejected by its own people is no longer an asset for Beijing, but a toxic liability. China's silence is the clearest sign that it has pulled the plug on the Khamenei regime. This situation brings to mind a terrifying scenario for all autocratic regimes, a chain of revolutions similar to the Arab Spring. Remember, a spark in Tunisia set Egypt, Libya, and Syria ablaze. There is no guarantee that the "death to the dictator" slogans chanted in the streets of Tehran today will not echo in Moscow or another capital tomorrow. It is precisely this contagious courage that autocrats fear. The Iranian people's bare-handed repulsion of IRGC tanks is shattering the perception of an invincible state. The year 1979, with the fall of the Shah's regime, gave birth to a model of theocratic totalitarianism. At the time, this change upset the balance in the region. Today, the pendulum is swinging in the opposite direction. What is happening as of January 1st, 2026, is the revenge of 1979. However, this rematch has the potential to shake not only Iran's domestic politics, but also the global balance of power. Because if Iran falls or undergoes a radical regime change, Russia's logistical center in the Middle East and China's energy security and Belt and Road project will be compromised. The Iranian regime is actually experiencing the depths of a legitimacy crisis in this process, which it calls an economic crisis. Pezeshkian's confession that "whoever took the dollar ate it" is the official document of the state's bankruptcy. The people no longer want reform. They want to completely pull the plug on the system. At this point, the lack of help from the autocratic bloc is the main factor turning the regime's internal panic into full panic mode. Chinese President Xi Jinping viewed Iran as the insurance for its energy security through 25 years of strategic agreements. However, as the regime loses control in Avaz, China's billions of dollars in investment have evaporated, and the strategic partnership fairy tale has been wiped out. The Beijing administration is now in a panic, searching for alternatives for its industry, which is dependent on Iranian oil. But it is impossible to fill the gap left by the sudden withdrawal of 4 million barrels of oil per day from the market. The Venezuela door is closed, the Iran door is falling, the Russia door is under heavy restrictions. Iran was the last bastion. But now China's energy security has entered a crisis along with the Tehran regime. This means that even China, the regime's biggest protector, can no longer lift a finger to save Khamenei, because there is no longer anyone to invest in. As logistical and economic lines collapse one by one, the real domino effect is happening within the regime's most trusted stronghold, its own security forces. The iron fist the regime has built over the years by spending billions of dollars is shattering like glass in the face of public anger. This fire of rebellion was not limited to Tehran or Avaz. From Tehran to Isfahan, from Bandar Abbas to Baluchistan, people rose up in a coordinated manner across all 31 provinces, in more than 111 cities. In the streets, they raised the lion flags of the Shah era, rejecting the identity imposed by the regime. Attacks on the regime's symbols, Khamenei's posters, besieged bases, and police stations show that the threshold of fear has been crossed. If crowds in a city like Mashhad, considered the regime's sacred stronghold and Khamenei's hometown, are shouting, "This country will not be a homeland until the mullahs are buried," then the regime's religious and ideological shield has also been breached. Amid this internal chaos, a strategic warning shot from Washington tied the regime's hands and shifted the balance on the ground in favor of the protesters. Donald Trump's clear warning, "If you kill even one protester, we will make you pay a heavy price. We will personally target Khamenei," was the final psychological blow that caused the security forces to hesitate. This warning reinforced the perception among the public that the world and superpowers are behind us, while triggering fears among regime generals and Revolutionary Guard commanders. What if I give an order and get prosecuted? What if Khamenei is gone and I'm left in the lurch? The seizure and burning of armored vehicles by protesters in the streets of Tehran, accompanied by the crowd shouting, "We've taken Tehran!" is the clearest evidence of this power vacuum. Let's delve deeper into the military dimension of the axis of evil. The Russia-Iran-North Korea triangle. Iran was the financier and drone factory of this triangle. The closure of ports and the cut in oil revenues could destroy the cash flow at the heart of this triangle. This chain of events is fundamentally destroying the financing model of Iran's regional terrorist network. The closure of ports means the end of payday forever for Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, and the militias in Iraq. Iran's economic collapse will topple the entire network of proxy forces across the Middle East like dominoes. Without money, there is no loyalty. Without rockets, there is no threat. Right now, Tehran has not a hole in its pocket, but a gaping tear that cannot be mended. For years, the regime told its people the fairy tale of the resistance economy, claiming they were standing strong despite the sanctions. But what we see today is not resistance. It is a total systemic collapse. Oil workers are on strike, port workers are on strike, police are deserting, shopkeepers have closed their shutters. A state can be defeated while its army is fighting on the front lines. But when its economy, logistics, and security bureaucracy simultaneously join its people, that state is technically collapsed. The call by Prince Reza Pahlavi in exile to bring millions into the streets is not just a search for a charismatic leader, but the Iranian people's desire to correct the mistake of 1979, reject the regime's ideology, and turn their face toward the civilized world. The crowds of millions in Mashhad and Tehran ended the regime's legitimacy not at the ballot box, but in the streets, behind burning barricades. On this historic night, rumors that the mullahs were planning to flee to Moscow signaled not the beginning of the end, but the end itself, like rats abandoning a sinking ship. The Iranian people are rewriting their own destiny, this time forcibly taking the pen from the mullahs' hands. We will continue to bear witness to these historic moments, to the rebirth of a nation. So, what are your thoughts on this matter?